All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Whether you're here with us currently or you're watching this at a later date, I want to first thank you guys for making the time to come and view this local advisory council virtual update. My name is Matthew Otero, and I am Senior Director of Data with tnAchieves. I'll be the person kind of guiding you through this today to kind of look at some statewide numbers as well as look at some specific numbers for Hardeman County. The reason why we are doing these meetings in total is because back in 2015, legislation for Tennessee Promise created a group essentially that the county mayor would set up and would invite this local advisory council to come and listen, and then from the information we provide, be able to provide guidance, feedback, kind of be a layer of accountability for us since we are supporting an organization working in this particular county. We used to do these in person, but obviously with the past year and a half, that has not been the easiest thing to do in-person meetings. And so we went and pivoted to Zoom, and it's been great. We've been doing 91 of these this week. So we are at the tail end of the week's virtual webinar updates. And it's been great to be able to interact with those from across the state that we otherwise don't get to see a ton. So as I mentioned before, we'll be going over some statewide and then county specific numbers. When you entered, you did see that your mic and camera were able to be on. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask any. And if not, you can always ask at the end of the presentation as well. With that being said, we'll go ahead and jump in. For those of you that may not remember or may not know, the slide kind of explains what tnAchieves is. We are a nonprofit organization, 501c3, that is privately funded, and we are the partnering organization for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship in 90 of the 95 counties across the state. What that simply means is we are responsible for the communication to students and parents about Promise-specific requirements and what is expected of them if they want to maintain their eligibility, as well as just kind of providing tidbits and guidance for them as they're thinking about what they're going to do after their high school graduation. In addition to working with the students and parents, we also recruit volunteer mentors. And so as you can see in those numbers on the slide, we've worked with over 440,000 students since 2008 when we first started in Knox County. We've recruited over 71,000 volunteer mentors. And over the course of that time frame, we've worked with over 600 Tennessee high schools and 67 post-secondary institutions that are eligible for Tennessee Promise. One thing to note is you'll see that there are five counties that are grayed out. Those counties are served by the Heirs Foundation, so they are still Tennessee Promise eligible counties. They just work with that different partnering organization. The next slide is going to kind of show you some of the core components of tnAchieves. When I say core components, I mean things that have always been a part of our program or are now part of our program as we're focusing on some new initiatives. And so the first I'll talk about are those top three, kind of the Tennessee Promise logo, the people at a bench, and then the person shoveling. They're there to represent the last dollar scholarship, the volunteer mentor, and the community service requirement that all students are expected to complete. Those three components were with tnAchieves when we started in 2008, and we were just a private scholarship, private organization. But they've stayed with us throughout that time frame, even when Tennessee Promise went into effect in 2015, and are still part of our three main components. The last dollar scholarship represents the financial aspect of Tennessee Promise, and it's the thing that most of our students and parents are aware of. They know that with that last dollar scholarship, if they maintain their eligibility, they're able to go to a post-secondary eligible institution and have their tuition and mandatory fees covered some way, somehow, either by just Tennessee Promise alone or with a combination of federal aid or the Hope Scholarship. But beyond money, we know that there are other things that are needed to help a student transition and then ultimately be successful when they do arrive in college. And so that's where the volunteer mentor component of our program comes into play. By pairing every eligible student up with a volunteer mentor in the community, we're able to ensure that a student has essentially a resource and a guide that can help them as they are navigating kind of leaving their high school career in the past and then getting ready to start whatever may be coming for them after high school graduation. Our data has shown that over the summertime when a student leaves high school, they're at their most vulnerable sort of point where they may hit a speed bump, they may hit a challenge that ultimately allows them to fall through the crack. Whereas the volunteer mentor has gotten to know the student during their final semester of high school, and they can kind of be that guide for the student and family alike for any questions that they may end up having. The last component is that community service requirement, and that is basically the spirit of giving back. Tennessee Achieves has always required its students to give 8 or more hours before every semester that they plan on using either the Tennessee Achieves Scholarship or what is now Tennessee Promise. And that's because the students should be giving back to their community. The community is what has kind of got them to that particular point. And so for students, it's a good way to be able to thank the people around them and kind of give back to a community that has given them this opportunity. So those three components have always been a part of our organization, whereas we are now sort of focusing on some newer initiatives. So since we last presented a couple of years ago, some of the newer initiatives that we have are focusing on college preparedness as well as college retention. And so you'll see those two icons at the bottom are representing our summer programs as well as our new complete coaching model that we've been using for the last couple of years. To give some details, the summer program are either our online summer bridge program, our in-person summer bridge program, or our summer institute program. All of those programs are typically focusing on students that would otherwise be starting college maybe about a semester behind. And that's because students that maybe don't meet the academic level that is asked of them at the college would have to take what are called learning support classes. Those learning support classes are paid for by Tennessee Promise, but can kind of set a student back maybe in their timeline. And so if a student is willing to give up a portion of their summer, either 3 weeks for the bridge programs or 6 to 10 weeks for the summer institute, they have the opportunity to not only test out of those learning support classes, but possibly also earn some college credit while they're doing it. The summer bridge program only focuses on learning support classes, whereas the institute program focuses on the college credits as well. Most students that take part come from either a minority background or from a low income background, and are usually our most at-risk students. So just to provide some data from each of them, the summer bridge program this past cohort had an 89% success rate, which meant that the student either improved from the beginning of the summer to the end of the summer, or they actually tested out of their learning support classes. And those classes would be in either English, math, or reading. When it comes to the Summer Institute, those students actually had a 100% success rate, which meant that they not only tested out of their learning support classes, but they also earned 9 college credit hours as they began their first semester. So for both groups of students, it gives them the opportunity to, instead of starting a semester behind, actually catch up or actually even maybe be ahead depending on what program they were in. The Summer Bridge program is found across the state at all of our 13 community colleges across 15 campuses, whereas the Summer Institute program is currently only in Shelby County, focusing on students that are kind of in the urban core of that city. So that is a program that with success that we've seen, we're hopeful that we'll be able to expand, but it is currently only provided in Memphis. The complete coaching model, which is one of our also newer initiatives, is a coaching model where staff on our team, including those that we have here with us today, are working individually with students that come from kind of a lower income background in each county. So each coach is assigned to a particular service area, and within that service area, they are paired up with a group of students that fit that criteria. We have seen that one of the biggest data indicators about success when it comes to retention or graduation is a student's income. Basically, if they're coming from a lower income background, they are more likely to handle or encounter challenges that may basically distract them or not allow them to retain or graduate at a normal pace. And so that's where our complete coaches come in. They are consistently building relationships with them, checking in with them on a regular basis, and essentially taking the baton of what the volunteer mentor does for our students before they get into college. Our complete coaches are taking that and then working with the college staff to ensure that the student has the best opportunity to be successful while they are in college. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of other slides, but I just wanted to provide that background. This slide here is again just showing you kind of the reach of Tennessee Achieves. So showing you again the counties, the high schools, the colleges that we work with, showing you of those counties that we work in, which ones are rural, as well as how many are distressed or at risk. And then that bottom line is going to show you kind of the breakdown on a statewide level where students are going to school if they are Promise eligible. So almost 8 out of 10 are going to the local community college versus the other 20% are being pretty much split in half at the local Tennessee College of Applied Technology or eligible four-year university. Obviously, depending on the county, especially like with Hardeman County, I would say those numbers are a little bit going to be skewed in a different way because you have probably a closer TCAT compared to just the local community college. And so you would see a higher percentage at that TCAT level compared to what the statewide numbers are looking at. This slide is also showing you statewide numbers. And so from top to bottom, it's showing you the group of students that Tennessee Achieves is working with on an annual basis. So to give you that sort of background, every year we're working with over 60,000 new seniors that get enrolled in the Tennessee Achieves program. From the 90 counties, we always expect that. And so for this upcoming class of 2022, we're going to expect 60,000 plus students again. A couple of years ago, we actually had our maximum, which was just over 64,000 students. So it's a lot of students to work with, and kind of why some of those earlier initiatives I talked about, things like the volunteer mentor, are so crucial, because we wouldn't be able to have that sort of in-depth relationship with a student without that assistance from our volunteer mentors. The top line is going to show you, of those 60,000 plus students, how do they fit into kind of the statewide numbers? So the 89% is a representation of all seniors across the state of Tennessee. Essentially 9 out of 10 of seniors across the state are enrolling within the tnAchieves program. So we're dealing with a ton of students. The 78% and 86% number are looking at students at a community college. The 78% is showing you students that went through the tnAchieves program and were considered full-time first-time freshmen at that community college. So almost 8 out of 10 students at the community college are going to be students that went through the tnAchieves program. Versus the 86% number is going to show you graduates at a community college. That's how much are meaning students that went through the tnAchieves program. So basically, if they go through the tnAchieves program, they're likely to go to one of the community colleges if they do go there. And eventually, if they're going to graduate, they most likely went through that tnAchieves program. The middle line are just some fun facts showing you that 1 out of every 2 students, a little bit more than that, are going to be eligible for federal financial aid, so things like a Pell Grant. And so that's why, in particular, we push the FAFSA requirements so much, because not only is it for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship, but it is also their application for the Hope Scholarship, as well as for any federal funding that a student may be eligible for. The 40% is the self-reported number from students that apply for Tennessee Promise that identify as a first-generation student. We believe that number is probably a little bit higher, but because it is self-reported, that's what the student is identifying on the Tennessee Promise application. And then that 51% number is going to show you, for students that are starting with Promise, what are the majors that they are typically pursuing in their first semester. And that's going to be students that are pursuing either health-related fields or STEM-related fields. And that kind of outlines with a bigger picture of the Drive to 55 and kind of Tennessee's ultimate goal of having a workforce that has the skills to basically fill the jobs and the employers that the state is trying to recruit to the state. The last line is then again showing you the operating budget for Tennessee Promise for statewide, and then what tnAchieves specific budget is to operate in the 90 counties that we work in. All right, now we get to kind of the nitty-gritty details of specifically Hardeman County. On this page, you will see the FAFSA filing number, as well as the community service hours that have been completed on a statewide level and on a county level. If we look at the FAFSA filing rate, you will see that statewide, the class of 2021 submitted at an 86% rate. That's a great rate, still leading the nation, but it was actually down for us as a state. The year before, we were at 90%. And so we know, among a couple of other things, that that's mostly going to be related to kind of COVID happening with this past cohort. We know that this is something that we want to work towards and want to get back up to that 90% level. But it also is super encouraging when you look at some counties, specifically like Hardeman County, that was above the 90% threshold. They were at 91% this past year. So although things were different, things were unusual, and students were virtual or they were hybrid or whatever combination it may have been, still 9 out of 10 students that were eligible were filing their FAFSA by the deadline. And so that's just thanks to the community partners, whether it be at the high school staff, the college staff, people working together to ensure that students understood that this was a really important application and that they should get that FAFSA done as soon as possible. When we look at community service hours, it's going to show you how many Hardeman County have submitted in the time frame that they've been eligible for Tennessee Promise, so just under 11,000 hours. Those 11,000 hours are contributions to the statewide number of total of almost 3.4 million. We hang our hat on that. It's something that we are really proud of as an organization, and that we want our counties to be proud of as well, because these are students that are giving back to their community that maybe otherwise would not have. And hopefully after going through the Tennessee Promise program, are realizing that it's something that they should be doing on a regular basis and that they can get as much as they're giving to their community. And so for anybody that maybe is watching at a later time, hopefully you're also seeing some of these hours from your students as they're trying to help out with the organizations or nonprofits in Hardeman County specifically. This slide is again also showing you a comparison between the state and Hardeman County. And it's going to show you essentially kind of the progress that students made in that county and on a statewide level for the class of 2019. So the first 3 rows that we see there are all for the class of 2019, whereas the last row, which is the 3-year graduation rate, is looking at the class of 2017. If we look at the top line, remember that Tennessee Promise applicant number is going to be about 90% of the students statewide. And so you could, in your mind, say, okay, maybe this is 90% of the students in Hardeman County. It'll differ from county to county, though. That second line is then going to show you the number of students that stayed eligible and then eventually enrolled with Tennessee Promise at an eligible institution. And so although that number is much lower than the applicant number, it's important to keep in mind that not everybody that signs up for Tennessee Promise is going to plan on using it. For many, it may be their plan B or plan C. And so that's why we do see that number decrease over the course of the year. But if we look at the number that it did enroll, we can see then that their first year retention rate in Hardeman County was 61%. It was just a few percentage points below the statewide average of 67%. And then if we look at the 3-year graduation rate, we can see that they were both on par with the state average of 35%. So all of that to be said is those numbers are good because they're staying right within the state average, but we understand that for the county specifically and for the state, that we want those numbers to improve. Our goal is not just to get students to college. We're not just a college access program, but we are also a college retention and eventually a graduation program. And so if we move to this next slide, it's going to show you again, sort of what the benefits are of going through the Tennessee Achieves program when we look at the statewide numbers and see them in retention and graduation rates. So if we look at the first year retention, in that gray box, we're going to look at a number of 53%. And that's a representation of all students that are starting at a community college as a first-time full-time freshman. This will include some Promise students, and this will also include students that are not Promise eligible. They are retaining at a 53% rate. If we look, though, at just students that enroll for Tennessee Promise or apply for Tennessee Promise and then are enrolled in the Tennessee Achieves program, and those students are going to an eligible institution. So that can be a community college, a TCAT, or one of the eligible 4-year universities. Those students that are starting with Promise are retaining at a 67% rate. So they are retaining at a 14% increase over just the general population at a community college. And then if we take another step back and look at just students that apply for Tennessee Promise and enroll in the Tennessee Achieves program, and then go to any college. So that can be eligible institutions for Promise or non-eligible institutions like the UTs or an out-of-state school. They are retaining at a 74% rate, so more than 21% than the basic group of students at a community college level. And the reason we believe that is because they are getting added benefits by being through our particular program. So they're getting a volunteer mentor. They're getting weekly communication from their coaches on staff. They're getting opportunities for things like community service and job shadowing, and just ultimate guidance on what it is and what's going to take of them to be able to transition from high school to college as smoothly as possible. And then if we look at the 6-year graduation rate, we can see a similar pattern. So again, that gray box is going to show you just students at the community college, so Promise kids and non-Promise kids. And then that 51% number is going to show you just students that start at a community college but went through the Tennessee Achieves program. So they are more than likely 16% going to graduate at a better rate than their counterparts that did not go through the Tennessee Achieves program. The things that you'll see on the right-hand side are again going to show up about some of those initiatives I talked about earlier. So with the summer programs and the complete program, we're seeing that students have a boost of 23 and 34% over just the general population when it comes to retention, if they're in one of those programs. The bottom program there about Knox Promise is something that is specific to Knox County, but it's something that we're hopefully going to be able to expand in the future. And what Knox Promise is through private donations, we're able to basically have the complete program in that county, but instead of limiting it to students that are from a low income background, we're able to extend it to everybody in that county. So if you're a Knox County student, you get paired up with a complete coach and you have that same sort of check-in process that students across the state are getting, but only if they're a low income student. In addition to that, they're also going to be eligible for what are called completion grants. In Knox County, if you are a student in Knox County, you can submit a completion grant for something that maybe you're having struggles with that are preventing you from being kind of the best student that you can be possibly. Those things can be things like food insecurities, transportation issues, book and material costs, things that we don't necessarily think of when we think about going to school, but are very much a part of a challenge that a student may encounter as they're trying to maybe balance life and going to school. And so Knox Promise, which includes that complete coach kind of connection that students get, they also have the opportunity to actually have Tennessee Achieves and their coach help them guide and maybe get resources that they can use to hopefully allow them to focus better on school. This ties us then back to kind of the college going rate and what it looks like at the state and at the county level. So as we can see in the state college going rate, it increases in 2014 to 2015, and that is because of Tennessee Promise. Maybe not solely because of it, but because that went into effect. For the next 4 or 5 years then, Tennessee Promise kind of keeps the college going rate at around 62 to 64%. And then in 2020, COVID rears its ugly head again, and we see, not again, but it rears its ugly head, and we see the college going rate drop in the state by almost 5%. And then in Hardeman County, we can see from year to year that it drops by almost 9%. And so definitely see the effects of what a pandemic can happen, as well as just understanding that things can happen that affect students in their college going rate. So with that all being noted, as an organization, we're aware of that. We know kind of what worked and what didn't work in our kind of virtual only year last year. And we have a plan set to try to hopefully get these numbers back to where they were for both the FAFSA filing rate and the college going rate, while also simultaneously hopefully boosting our retention and graduation rates. But how can the local advisory council, how can those in our community help us? Well, that's going to be through volunteer mentors. Because of the volume of students that we work with, as I said before, we cannot individually develop relationships with them, but our volunteer mentors can. And so on our screen, you can see in Hardeman County specifically, we need 35 mentors. Those mentors will pair with students, and they will work in 3 different ways. So as you can see on this screen, it's going to show you what the roles are, being that task manager. So that reminder that lets them know deadlines, that kind of works with tnAchieves. The resource, somebody that the students or families can go to and ask a question. And if this mentor doesn't know, they can at least point them in the direction of our staff or anybody that may know that answer. And then also just being an encourager. They can be that person that lets the student know that, hey, they can do this if they so choose so, and that, you know, even with the year that it's been, that they are doing a great job, that they're going to eventually be high school graduates, and that they can pursue whatever it is that they feel like is their best next step. For the mentors, generally, the program is going to be very similar. They're going to be able to email, text, call. They're going to be able to use our virtual platform called tnAchieves Connect. Those will both be available to our mentors. But some of the changes for this upcoming year are going to be things like called an open house. Because our mentors did let us know that they would like to have the opportunity to meet people in person, we're going to host these open houses that there's no formal presentation, but a tnAchieves staff member will be at the location, usually at a college, and they'll be there to help guide any questions, as well as maybe just facilitate conversation. The college staff will hopefully also be present at that meeting. And so for the mentor and the student, if they have any specific questions, either for tnAchieves or the college, they'll be able to get that all done in one shot, basically. In addition to that, mentors are also going to be encouraged to meet up with their students if they'd like in person. Our chairman, he meets up with his students and they have like kind of pizza together. So they all get together, they have a meal, and he's able to kind of get to know them. So as a mentor, if you have a similar plan that you would like to do and meet with your students on your own, that's totally fine as well. Just know that you're going to have a variety of ways to connect with your students, either virtually or electronically or in person. So whatever is going to fit you best, you'll have that opportunity. You will see on the screen that the deadline to apply is December 3rd. And so anybody that's interested, whether they're returning or they're a new mentor, they can visit tnachieves.org/mentors and they can sign up today. The other thing that we will ask our community at whole is, besides being a mentor, is spreading the news about what it's like to be a mentor. So if you have a listserv or a group of coworkers or friends that you feel like would be interested in this, please reach out to them and let them know. If you would like particular communication, let tnAchieves know and we can provide that to you. So we can provide written documentation, we can provide PowerPoints, we can provide social media images, whatever may fit you best. We can do the legwork of that for you, and then you can just send it out for us. In addition to that, if you are part of any organization, so a Lions Club, a Kiwanis, a Rotary, a local chamber, a church, anything of that nature, let us know. And if there's an opportunity to come speak in public, speak in person, we'll do it. Give us the contact information, we'll connect with them, and we'll try to figure out a day and time that works best for the organization, so that way we can kind of go and pitch why we feel like it is so important to have mentors in the community for these students based on the data that we showed today. And then the last thing is just to spread the news that Tennessee Promise is already open for the class of 2022. Because last year we didn't get a chance to be in front of the students, we do feel like there was a handful of students that did not apply because they either just weren't aware of it or they didn't have that sort of push from their high school staff because they weren't in person. So letting students know that, hey, if you're a class of 2022 student and you want to pursue this, by all means do it. Whether it's your plan A, plan B, or plan C, it's best to have this as an opportunity. And then as the data has shown that just by going through our program, they're going to be at a higher likelihood to retain and then hopefully eventually graduate as well from the school that they go to. So that's it for our presentation. You'll see my contact information is here on the screen and a little blurb from a past student. But at this time, is there anything I can help answer for anybody who's maybe viewing it that I can help clarify? Okay, well, it seems like nobody has any questions. So at this time, like I said, you have my contact information. So if you'd like to reach out, feel free to do so. But if not, I appreciate you all being here today, and I hope that you have a great rest of your Friday.